And just like that, we are back live here on YouTube and on Spotify, which is not live. But we are back live on YouTube for the first time, and I don't know when. It's been a long time, but finally back live here on the Quarterfinals podcast, episode 153. College football playoff has taken place. Quarterfinals reaction and Michigan hire. I am here myself on the computer here, but you guys can hear me, so that's good. But we have a lot to get into. Yeah, like I was just saying, quarterfinal reactions. Michigan over the holiday break hiring Kyle Whittingham. I have some thoughts on that. Transfer portal is opening up, and we also have some thoughts on the Bucs Panthers game, final game of the regular season for Tampa. Huge implications there. I think did I pull this up? I don't think I did. Well, whatever. It's somewhat of a different show for us for late here. High atop a somewhat improving Jacksonville, Florida. Let's see here. I get some numbers up here I did not get earlier, but that's okay. But yeah, we're high top an improving Jacksonville, Florida. It was very cold earlier this week, so thankfully that's changed and it should be getting a lot warmer. But again, a lot of things to go over here. We have reactions to several of the games that have taken place. Let me see. Is that what I wanted? Yes. I'm very, very excited for this year. It's a new year for us. This will be our third year. Well, not technically our third year anniversary, but it's our third full year of doing this. Had some things. I have some things planned here. Some things that we're going to be working on. We're not changing the show entirely. The show's not going away. Just we'll kind of disclose this some more going forward. But there are a few things I am wanting to implement going forward this year. Some changes that will benefit you and benefit me as well. So just keep an eye on that. Probably won't implement those for a little bit. Still working on details of that, but this might be a very, very, very good, very, very good year for us. And hey, look, just because we didn't get to 20 subscribers, you get one more. That's okay. Disappointed, but that just means that we'll get there eventually this year. So again, very new year to the show. Of course, this is a very strange time. So we usually have shows every single week, but we didn't. Last couple of weeks, we did have one for Vertical's Extra Pod that debuted, I think this time last week, and the week after. But yeah, a lot of things to go over, a lot of things to discuss, and hopefully you guys are here for it. If you like college football, that's kind of what the show is mostly about. Subscribe to the channel. Again, I get it. We didn't get the 20 subscribers before the end of the year, but, it happens. Just be sure to do it, okay? Subscribe. Even if you are subscribed, and make sure you check and make sure you are. Follow us on the socials as well. Twitter, X, Instagram, we're on there sometimes. And Spotify, podcast feed is where we originally started out as on. Not on YouTube, but on Spotify before. So be sure to check us out. Those should all be in the channel descriptions, I believe. So they should all still be there. Okay. I'm not going to go for a full hour here. This will be a bit of a shorter show. But I need to do something before the weekend. So we're doing it now. Quarterfinals reactions. I just noticed in the title I put CFP twice, but we'll fix that afterwards. CFP quarterfinals reactions. Very, 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 very interesting college football playoff games yesterday. And not so much actually, let me pull up some numbers here real quick. I forgot to do this earlier. Let me see here. Is this what I wanted? Hold on real quick. This is what I wanted. I brought the wrong numbers. That's okay. Yeah, a lot of the games to discuss here. We'll do the one. We'll kind of go work backwards. So we'll start out with Ole Miss, Georgia. Then we'll move, backwards in time to the game New Year's Eve. Ole Miss, Georgia, 39-34. I cannot stress to you. Let me fix the camera here. There we go. I cannot stress to you how important this game is for Ole Miss and that staff of there in Oxford. To do what they did, to go through what they went through, having Lane Kiffin leave and having all the staff turmoil and whatnot, and the uncertainty before he left and now he leaves, and the sort of scrambling behind the scenes. And look, there's a lot of things that have not been discussed yet that I'm pretty sure will come out in the years to come following this cultural playoff run. But I give a lot of credit to Pete Golding, that staff there, him, Charlie Weiss Jr., the entire staff there, the folks you don't hear about or talk about, nutritionists, trainers, things like that. All those folks whose futures were not certain with Lane Kiffin leaving to go to LSU. I give them a ton of credit, man. Give them a ton of credit. You hear a lot of stuff about coaching staffs in disarray around this time of the year for coaching firings, and they're not for programs who are not in the postseason or let alone the playoff. This is like that times 100. Like you hear stories about, coaching hirings and, the back channeling you do with assistant coaches and whatnot. Ole Miss had to do that, but times 100. Both them and LSU this year next extent, but mainly of Ole Miss because they were still competing in the postseason. Give those guys a lot of credit there in Oxford. Just give them a ton of credit. A lot of credit to Pete Golding. That was a fantastic game to watch yesterday. Complete the meme, absolute cinema. Back and forth game. Looked like Ole Miss was going to pull away in this, the second half. Georgia starts storming back. They tie the game, or I think did they tie the game or they take? I think they did tie the game. Yeah, because it's 39. That came from the safety, but Georgia ended the game. But the game was tied after Ole Miss was up by 10, and just absolutely insane. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss, for a guy who competed at Ferris State. Now, grant you, it was a good team at Ferris State, but that's Division III, and that's like a tick below FCS. Just incredible, man. Him running the football, him, making plays with his legs and throwing the football, and some of those plays made in the second half where at one point he started out 13-13, which is a shirkable record. Just incredible. Incredible to watch. Incredible team effort for them. And I know there was a lot of controversy with the play calling, or not play calling, but penalties and whatnot, and no calls, and the way the game ended with just a lot of weird stuff going on. But just a fantastic game to watch in a day where a lot of the games are not very competitive, especially the earlier two games. Very nice to have the final game be the best one. And for Ole Miss, they move on to the college football semifinals. Let alone, should I remind you, and a lot of folks have said this too, in a year after the year, people thought they were in line to compete for the national championship. Right? Last year, they brought in all those transfers like Walter Renault and whatnot to fresh up their D line, and had Jackson Dart. And then coming into this year, people were saying, "Oh, I mean, Ole Miss is going to regress back to the mean. They're going to sort of go back to kind of where they were before last year." Complete opposite. Last year was the layup year, and this was the big year. So kudos to Ole Miss, and kudos to that staff there. I cannot stress that enough, how incredible of a job they did. And now they face Miami. And outside of them making it the national championship this year, the biggest game in school history. By far the biggest game in school history. Certainly the biggest postseason game in school history. Just incredible to watch. As for Georgia, look, there's not much you can say or criticize for a team who loses in a close game. They did everything they could in this game, Georgia did. I think offensively, that's the least of your concerns. I think Gunnar Stockton played as well as you could. Defensively, though, is where it's like, again, it's hard to criticize a team, again, when you have such a fun game like this, a loser. But certainly, yes, defensive breakdowns, opportunities for Georgia. Look, they had issues all year with not getting to the quarterback, and especially with their defensive line being, you don't necessarily fear them. And some of that's because of nutrition or mostly with players leaving and whatnot with the transfer portal. So they can't, the depth that Georgia has had in the past in recent years just isn't there anymore. And it reared its head against Bama earlier in the year. Tennessee, even they won that game. Several close games. And going to see a line from Josh Payton, his reaction last night on that individual video he did. Ole Miss did what a lot of teams couldn't do this year, with the exception of Bama, which is cut the head off the snake. Ole Miss did it. Auburn didn't. Tennessee didn't. Florida didn't. Bama did, but Ole Miss did. With the mostly interim staff or whatnot. But again, it's, look, the whole defensive stuff, again, that's been an issue all year. They can't rush the pass, or they couldn't rush the passer. And that happened yesterday. They just couldn't get the Trinidad Chambliss, and he was the kind of difference in the game. Frankly, if Ole Miss had any other quarterback who wasn't very mobile and can make plays, I think Georgia would have been able to handle him, but it is what it is. So Ole Miss moves on. Georgia is done. And how about that for Georgia? 2 years in a row. Make it to Sugar Bowl and you lose. I don't know. Never saw that coming, but how about that? Make some water. We'll quick move on to the Rose Bowl, and we'll talk about the Orange Bowl. Then we'll talk about the Cotton Bowl. Then we'll move on. And if you can't tell my voice here, recovering from a sinus infection or something. I'm really not that sick. It's just that very strange situation here of the voice. So if you hear me coughing a little bit, just to be aware of that. But should be good to go as usual. How about that? We're 10 minutes into the show. We've already talked about one game, so that's a good clip there for us. Indiana 38, Bama 3. This probably the most jarring result of the entire playoff. I think by far the most jarring result. Think about this here, and I've said this back a couple weeks ago when Indiana was in the Big Ten championship game, and I said, hey, if they won it, that would be the biggest win in program history. That was sort of me kind of projecting ahead and saying, hey, if they win it, go for them biggest win in program history, let alone school history, even topping anything in basketball. And no offense to Bob Knight and coaches before and after him, I guess, but I thought that if Indiana won the Big Ten championship game over Ohio State, that was going to be the biggest win in their athletic program's history, because I was projecting that if they made the playoff, then they'll probably lose in the first round. I just didn't think they matched up physically with any of these teams, especially like Oregon, Georgia, Miami, and to a certain extent, Bama. I was wrong on that. I know we didn't do proper predictions for these games. If we did, I kind of behind the scenes thought Bama was going to win, so kind of aligned with Josh Pate and others, and we were wrong. Indiana, 38-3. Indiana was the most physical team here. They basically did everything that, and I think a lot of folks have said this too, what Coach Zanetti has done, and it makes sense. He's a Saban disciple. He's really has taken that Saban mentality of, run the clock, dominating the clock, run the football, be the most physical team, have that instinct to, kill your opponent, metaphorically, to give them zero chance in the game and do so emphatically. That's what Indiana did basically all year, and that's what they did to Alabama. So essentially, Bama faced what they used to have as a head coach, especially in his prime and Nick Saban. Again, they were the most physical team, and Mendoza didn't do a whole lot through the air. He ran a little bit, but the biggest MVP here for Indiana was their lines of scrimmage. Defensive line, offensive line, they were just all over the place, especially on the O-line, pushing Bama around. I know Bama's D-line got to Mendoza a few times, but besides that, that's kind of it. Like Indiana camp did whatever they wanted to run the football, which surprised me because I thought Bama, talent-wise, especially on the D-line, should have been able to handle Bama, or at least handle Indiana, or at least stalemate them. But I was very surprised by that. Very, very surprised by that, for sure. Another thing, too, and we'll touch on that in a minute. We talk about when we discuss Bama here, we do the winners first. Again, just the mentality with Indiana was right there. They treated us as a total business approach, and they did that. Again, there was very little penalties, very few mistakes, no turnovers and whatnot. This was a very, very clean game from them. And now they move on to have a rematch with Oregon. Ironically, Oregon was in that same situation last year with Ohio State, and they were the victim of it. Now the tables have sort of turned halfway. But in a blowout like this, I mean, look, we can praise Indiana all we want to. They looked good. They really emphasized, again, controlling the clock, running the football, and they did that. They were very physical. There's not much to say about that. I mean, you got beat for Bama. You got dominated. You got your pants pulled down in public. And if you're Bama, I know there's a lot to say here in the blowout. Look, it was embarrassing. It's probably the worst loss I've seen from Bama in terms of point margin in my lifetime. Not been around that long. I mean, I am 22, 23 years old. So I mean, I've been alive for basically my entire life has been Nick Saban being the coach at Alabama. There was like a couple of years where he wasn't when I was born, and then most recently. So most of my life, most of my grade school years, and now my adult life has, at least before up until the last couple of years, was the Nick Saban era. I was used to Bama. If they lost, it was very competitive. It wasn't like a blowout like today. I know a lot of folks were comparing this to the most recent Bama blowout, which was against Clemson in 2016 in Santa Clara, or 2018, excuse me, not 2016. That's probably the most comparable one, but though I will say Bama had opportunities, though, to get back in that game. Like, it wasn't like this game where it's like, Indiana builds a huge lead and Alabama offensively just couldn't do anything. Like, as in the words of Kirk Herbstreit on the broadcast yesterday, for those of you who listened to it, I kind of agree with him. Like, Bama they were kind of just like existing. Like, they were just there. Like, they were just kind of there just to kind of get bullied, just get bullied around. And that's kind of jarring to see Bama stoop down to this level for the first time in about 20 years. And there's really nothing to say, really. I mean, it was a very, very physical beatdown. They did not do anything unique at all in Bama. They couldn't get the running game going, which, shocker, they didn't really try. The passing game was very sloppy. Ty Simpson got knocked around a few times. He got hurt. Eventually, so they brought in Austin Mack. I know there's going to be a lot of questions about Kalen DeBoer. I get it. Okay, I understand that a lot of folks aren't happy with him right now. A lot of folks want him fired. A lot of folks are joking, saying, "Oh, you can't run back to you can't run away to Michigan." I know all that stuff's out there. I totally understand it. I know a lot of folks feel that way, whether you're a Bama fan or just an observer. Kalen DeBoer's not getting fired. Okay, he is not getting fired. He's not going anywhere. Though I will say this, and we'll have to move on here, as we're not spending 30 minutes on this game. I will say it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks, months, of what sort of changes do they have to make. And this is something that Josh Pay hinted on with his individual video yesterday about sort of the mentality Bama has had. And this is kind of something that even, again, I like what Josh said here, similar to Clemson with the whole, it's, us against the world mentality. We're the underdog and we should, everyone's hating on you and whatnot. And that works to a certain extent. But I also agree with Josh Payne. What he said is that can only take you so long as to, once you reach success, the consequences of success, no one's doubting you anymore. Okay, like no one's doubting you, no one's hating on you. Everyone, well, some of your rivals will hate you, but most of the general public will go, "Yeah, you're a good football program. You won your national championship, and you're on the top of the world. You can do nothing wrong. You're like King Midas. Everything you touch turns to gold." The thing is, though, is that can only take you so long. Like eventually, that fuel has to run out, and that's what's happening with Clemson, with Bama. With Bama, though, and killing the board, it's like they're thinking they have that same mentality, but they're doing it even worse. And it's very, very strange to watch. So I wonder, is a potential, staff changes, whether it's like strength and conditioning changes or maybe it's changed at DC. I don't know. So it'd be interesting to see. Of course, the portal's open right now, so it'd be interesting, what players will leave, what players will, be coming into Bama. It looks like, for all we know, Ty Simpson will be back next year, so they'll be good at quarterback. But I'll just say, other parts of that team, I have no clue. To be honest, I have no clue. A lot of things could change here for Bama. Again, I don't think Kalen DeBoer is getting fired. They obviously know he's not getting fired. But I'll just say this, and I think some folks were, especially after last year, were kind of saying, hey, 2026 could be a very pivotal year for Kalen, or else he's in real danger of losing his job. I'm not going fully there yet, but I can understand why folks are starting to feel that way. That this might become a situation where you do have to start bringing that up, because this is Alabama. There are expectations, especially to the coach you just had before Kalen and Bear Bryant back 50 years ago or so, or 40 years ago, that there is a standard. There is a standard, and they're not meeting it right now. I'll be honest, they're not meeting it right now. Kalen DeBoer was hired to be the coach there last year. He's he understands the pressure. That's why he took the job. He has to be able to identify what is working, what's not working, and they need to just make the changes they need to make. Because clearly, what they've been doing, the inability to run the football and have stable offensive line play is non-negotiable. But that's not good enough. So again, they have to figure it out here. Again, the portal's open. I'm imagining there will be some staff changes there. Not the head man, but there will be changes, whether it's, again, coordinators, strength and conditioning, recruiting, so on and so forth. Everything's on the table for Bama, is what I'm trying to say. So Indiana and Oregon, a Big Ten game. How about that in the Peach Bowl of all places? The last one here for January 1st, and we'll get on to the New Year's Eve one. Similar to the Bama game, not much to discuss here in terms of, it wasn't a very exciting game, but Oregon 23, Texas Tech nothing. We'll briefly touch on Oregon, but I want to touch on the whole Texas Tech thing, and also kind of a little small mini commentary on the Orange Bowl in general. Oregon just looked at the most physical team. That's kind of a theme here. The most physical team has won these games. The exception of the Ole Miss game and maybe the Miami game. Well, actually, correction, no. Just the Ole Miss and Georgia game. But yeah, the most physical team won here. Now, grant you, Texas Tech for a Big 12 team, for Big 12 team standards, especially in this new era, definitely the most physical team in the Big 12. And that's kind of obvious given what they did throughout the season. But they just ran into a total machine, man. Like Oregon, while they could have, it's kind of weird. It's almost like Texas Tech and Oregon were like playing mirrors of each other. They were playing like they're It's almost like these two teams are like doppelgangers of each other. Like they're very, very similar type teams, very similar mentalities, very similar, styles of offense and defense. And it just happened that Oregon had more offense in this game versus Texas Tech. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line here. I mean, this game, I think at one point was like 6-0 or something like that. Very similar, honestly, in a lot of ways to that A&M Miami game. So, yeah, Oregon definitely a more physical team. They were clearly the only team that had found offense or some semblance of it. They were dominant with the special teams. I think they had like the blocked, that some sort of like fumble or something. They created turnovers. Just a very sad performance from Texas Tech offensive, but from Oregon, they just did enough to pull away here. Especially with again with Texas Tech, they did some stuff defensively to get to Dante Moore. I think they did have a couple of decent plays in the game, but it was a very boring game. I'll just say that was a very boring game. So hats off to Oregon. Again, they faced Indiana in the rematch on January 9th. Then the other game, the Fiesta Bowl, is on January 8th. But after Texas Tech, I know a lot of folks are going to be talking about Texas Tech and saying, "Oh, they didn't belong here," this, that, and the other. They earned the right to be in here, so they belong in here. Now, do I believe all the Big 12 teams should be available, or at least more than one Big 12 team should be in? No, I don't think so. So that I can agree with, but having them be shut out completely, I disagree with that. I think Texas Tech belonged here. They were the most dominant team in the Big 12. They destroyed every single team when they were healthy, with the exception when Brent Morton, quarterback there, was not healthy against Arizona State. But besides that game, they basically just destroyed and pummeled every single team they faced. Yes, was there limitations on offense? Some of it, because of preseason injuries, especially at running back. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. But one performance in a postseason game, especially something like this, the same thing with Bama too, does not make me say they should not belong. They did belong. They just didn't perform very well, right? Same thing with, Florida State in 2014. Yeah, they got blown out by Oregon, but did they not deserve to be there? Yeah, they deserve to be there. They earned the right to be there, but they just didn't play very well. So it's simple as that. Now, as for the Orange Bowl itself, the experience. Now, look, I didn't go to the game. I was just watching on my TV out there in the living room. It felt like a typical Dolphins game, to be honest. Speaking of Dolphins, and I was watching the Tampa game back this past weekend. It didn't look that much similar with the crowds there. In fact, there's honestly more fans at the Dolphins and Bucs game than there were at the Orange Bowl itself, the actual bowl game or the quarterfinal. So, yeah, that atmosphere down there is really, really bad, and that's what we can agree on. But at least most of us can agree on that. But yeah, Oregon 23-0 again. They face Indiana, and a sort of tables turned from last year. Remember, it was Oregon who was the number 1 seed, and they were having to play a rematch game, and it was their only playoff game, and they lost. Now the tables have turned. Now it's their opponent who's the number 1 overall seed, and they are facing you in a rematch. We're on that game next week. Then finally here to touch on this game, Miami, Ohio State. Miami moves on 24-14. Huge credit to Mario Cristobal and that whole organization down there, that whole program. They're doing things that I guarantee you, a lot of folks, after they lost to Middle Tennessee in his first year, and after they lost to Georgia Tech in that weird poor clock management game, I guarantee you there are a lot of folks back after those 2 games who are saying some version of Mario Cristobal is a good coach, but he will never do anything meaningful at Miami. I bet you they're saying that after, again, that Middle Tennessee game when they lost in his first year, the Georgia Tech football game, and especially obviously after last year when they had Cam Ward, when they lost to Syracuse. Who's laughing now? Much like Ole Miss. See, it's kind of funny. Ole Miss and Miami, very similar type teams, right? People thought that they missed their window. Ole Miss's window was supposedly last year, same with Miami. They didn't. They were just people, all these people's expectations were just a year early. Now here they are, a year after, and they're in the semifinal. Miami, at least in the playoff, is the best lines of scrimmage team. They're not the best team, overall team, but they're the best offensive line, defensive line combo in the whole thing. And that's very, very dangerous. Very, very I mentioned it back when we previewed the A&M and Miami game. I know we didn't even actually react to that game, but even previewing that game, and look, I chose A&M to win. But I was like, hey, guys, Miami's D-line and O-line, like that could be the difference in the game here, how physical they are. And have a lot of talent. Like a lot of those guys are going to be playing on Sundays, uh, even the ones who are not draft eligible. Like a lot of them will be, getting their names called in April for the upcoming drafts. But yeah, I mean, like they were the most physical, or they are the most physical team in terms of lines of scrimmage, and they should against Ohio State. And Carson Beck too, man. He made. I know I didn't watch a lot of this as I was down in St. Augustine, which is south of Jacksonville on New Year's, having going to some of the bars there and having a few beers. Don't worry, we Ubered back. I got home safely, but I didn't get a whole watch. I didn't get to watch a whole lot of this game in the first half, but the second half, man, like Miami, they were really physical in defense. They got to Julian Sand. They made him frustrated all evening for probably the first time since that Texas game, all the way back in like late August. But yeah, man, hats off to Mario Cristobal and them. I know he has been given a ton of crap for just over the years, not even his early years in Miami, but going back to Oregon, how he mishandled Justin Herbert and whatnot. And some of it's warranted, right? The clock management stuff and the offensive scheme. I get it. That's all warranted. But I'll tell you what, man, like for him to do this and get to the semifinals in the year after they had Cam Ward, again, which again, a lot of folks thought that they missed their window last year. That is such a baller move to do this now after missing out on the playoffs last year with what ended up being the number one overall pick in last year's draft. So kudos to him. As for Ohio State, they just had their worst game of the year, even worse than the game against Indiana. And for the first time, including that Indiana game, but at least to a larger extent, because the Indiana game was mostly a phone booth type game. And I thought Ohio State kind of got a little bit conservative, at least in the play calling. This one, they were not. And I think this was just plainly Miami, especially on that D-line, just being really physical. And probably for the first time since that Texas game that we've really seen Ohio State get frustrated consistently in a game where they were not being conservative at all with the play calling. They were trying to do some stuff, trying to get Jeremiah Smith involved, trying to get the run game going. It just didn't work. I know they scored 14 points, but it just seemed like it was 14 points, but Miami, instead of scoring 24, had scored like 50. They really didn't mean anything, really, in the grand scheme of things. So, look, I know a lot of folks are, jokingly saying now, Ryan Day's back in the hot seat again. He's fine. Same with counting the board to a certain extent, but yeah, like same with Kirby Smart. Like just because they lost their shit, like he's fine. Same with Ryan Day, he's fine. It was a good year for them. Nice follow up from the championship yesterday and make it to even not even the semifinals. But it's a tough business, man. It's really tough, and especially in these 12-team playoffs when you're having to face all these other talented teams, and now the transfer portal and the depth you have or the depth you used to have isn't what it is now. That's part of it too. And I think Ohio State found out that there are other teams in the country that can match them physically, and Miami was one of them. And now Miami, again, the best D-line, best O-line combination is still around, and they're in the Final Four. And that's scary for not just Ole Miss, but the winner of Indiana, Oregon, too. So just something to keep an eye on there or just something to think about as we kind of move along here in the playoff. So, Martin, real quick here, got thoughts on Kyle Whittingham. We have some, I've got this in the notes here, transfer, or I don't have the tab pulled up. But, yeah, going to talk briefly about Kyle Whittingham going to Michigan. Got some thoughts on that transfer portal stuff, and we have Bucs game 2 prediction for the Panthers. So, or versus the Panthers. Again, if you are new here, again, welcome into the show. Usually don't do these late nor less on Fridays, but we have to get a show available to you guys. Somehow, some way, we had to do it. And this is the only day we had left, so we're not doing it tomorrow because the Bucs play tomorrow on ESPN at 4:30. And I'm not doing it Sunday either. Well, I guess we could have done it Sunday, but it just wasn't going to work out. But we'll be back to the normal schedule next week. I'm pretty confident in that. Michigan hires Kyle Whittingham. This happened during our break. I was away visiting family. So I didn't have a lot of time to talk about this. This was something that, it's kind of interesting. So with the Penn State hire or the coaching, search, this name was brought up, but it wasn't like serious. It was like him and Kalani Sitake and like a few others as like the wild card names. This is one of them. And, what was kind of thrown out there is like, okay, yeah, I mean, he could leave, but a lot of folks thought when he, Whittingham announced he was stepping down, we all assumed, and including me, thought, okay, he's stepping down as in he's retiring. He's not, coaching again. But it turns out we were wrong, and he is, and he's going to Michigan as the next head coach. Excuse me. Ironically, the same place where Ohio State got the guy before Ryan Day. That's where Florida got Urban Meyer from Utah. So how about that? Two big-time programs in the two biggest conferences got, at least one of them got a successful coach who was there for a long time, and Kyle Whittingham. The other one got Urban Meyer, who was there for less time. But it really is kind of interesting there that the former Ohio State head coach who came from Utah went to Florida, now looks like Michigan's copying the same little, path there. In terms of success, in terms of coaches who have had sustained success, this, and I believe Jim Harbaugh, are the only two ones, at least in my recent memory, that have been coaches that I think are good hires, that have long sustained success. Now, you can say Rich Rod at West Virginia, but that's a little bit different because that, back then the Big East was sort of like this quasi, P4, G5 for G5 league. But in terms of total resume from a major conference or one of the bigger conferences, this is a good hire in terms of the resume stuff. Now, again, I'm not doubting Kyle Whittingham, the coach. I know he's going to bring a physical brand of football. He's an organized coach. He knows what he's doing. There's no scandal or anything like that involved with him. Very clean coach, very safe, if you will, in terms of off-the-field stuff. But it's like any hire, okay? It doesn't matter whether it's, Lane Kiffin, Alex Glesh, John Summerall, or even Kyle Whittingham. My only thing with any of these coaching hires is not that I fear it's not going to work out, which, who knows if it's going to work out. My question is, what will the staff look like? What will the staff? Will it be the Utah staff? Will it be, a combination of hiring other staffs? Or we don't know for sure. I don't think it's, that's been ironed out yet. But interesting to see what he fills it out with. But again, in terms of a, pure track record and resume hire, this is as good as you can get. And Kyle Whittingham is someone who I respect. It's not the style I love. Like, I'm more of like a spread, like air raid type fan in terms of the offenses. But in terms of getting a consistent style, a consistent winner, someone who has done it before and not to mention at one place for a long time, but in multiple conferences, right? Back when they were in the Mountain West and, still in the G5, then they go to the Pac-12, and then the Pac-12 dies, and they go to the Big 12 and have success throughout both or all three of them. That's a good sign. And not to mention, too, this is something that Bud Elliott brings up a lot in terms of coaching hirings. Kyle Whittingham, to me, fits the mold of he's a winner with no superstar and does it without a superstar quarterback. Now, it's not bad to have a superstar quarterback, but, some of these coaches, like, for example, Gus Malzahn, the reason why folks were enamored by him was because he had a superstar quarterback in Cam Newton. He wasn't a coach of that team for the Auburn team, but, he was tied to that success. So, coaches like that who have, are tied to the superstar quarterbacks, a lot of folks kind of get a little bit worried that happens. You don't have to worry about that with Kyle Whittingham. He has never had a superstar quarterback. He has good teams and no quarterback that is, the reason why the team's successful. Like, Kyle Whittingham is the reason why Utah was so successful in the Pac-12 and Mountain West and a little bit in the Big 12, although they're only, they were there for only 2 years. But yeah, good hire from Michigan. I have no deal it would work out. Just kind of using the Tom Brady line. But again, interesting to see what the staff looks like. A lot of folks are they're definitely going to mention this. Hey, can he recruit? The Midwest and whatnot. I have no doubt that he can do it. That's just my personal opinion. I know a lot of folks, especially come from that part of the country, kind of look at Brian Harsin at Auburn, for example, someone who failed to that. And look, some of it was his fault, and most of it was his fault, but some of it too was the politics of Auburn. I don't think that's the case here with Kyle Whittingham. I think there was some alignment with him. At least there's some trust in him. That wasn't the case with Brian Harsin at Auburn. There was no trust at all whatsoever. So I think Michigan fans and Kyle Whittingham in particular can rest aside that he will be given, at least in my opinion, or at least I would assume, the full keys to the kingdom. He should have all the resources available to him. So good hire to a certain extent. Interested to see what his staff looks like. That's all I need to see from him. He should be doing some good stuff there. Now, the only other question is, will he be there long term? Again, he did make it sound like he was going to retire back a couple years ago when it was announced that, hey, there's a head coach waiting and whatnot. Based on the fact that he took this job, leads me to believe he'll be around for at least 5 years. So you have at least a good foundation. once he does eventually retire, you'll hopefully have a proper successor, or you'll go hire someone else. But you'll have several years as a Michigan fan to enjoy this. So even amidst a very awkward situation with the whole Sherrone Moore thing, you ended up getting kind of a low-key sneaky good hire, which it shouldn't be, but I think Kyle Whittingham would prefer it to be a sneaky good hire. But yeah, good for Michigan there to get a fairly good coach to get hired, especially amongst all the turmoil going on within that program. All right, transfer portal. A lot of things happening here. A lot of players entering in. Since the last time we talked, a lot more bigger names have entered in. So this is coming from 247 now. Yeah, I would show this, but I can't do it on the iPad, which we're using to record. But I guess the top 10 players, I guess. We have DeAndre Moore, wide receiver from Texas. He's on the move. Omarion Miller, wide receiver from Colorado. He's on the move. Those are two players that I would imagine several schools, particularly in the SEC, are probably going to be in play for. Safety Kui Purich from Minnesota. He's also on the move. He's a top 10 player according to 247. Jaden Woods from Florida. Very talented player from Bo Napier's roster. He is on the move. A D lineman, I think it's Mateen something. I don't want to mispronounce his name. From Wake Forest. He is on the move. He is the number 6 player. Chas Coleman, edge player from Penn State. He is rated a 5-star player. And 247's transfer rankings, he is also on the move. Cam Coleman, one of the newer additions. He is on the move from Auburn. Back to them just a moment. Auburn in general. He is leaving, probably not coming back. Jim Estemaker, he's been in the portal for about a week or so. Likely want to follow his head coach, Eric Morris, to Oklahoma State. Not official, but there's a good chance he'll follow him. Brendan Sorsby, pretty low-key, sneaky good quarterback. He's also a 5-star. Most of these guys are here in the top 5 of 247's rankings. Leaving Cincinnati, going elsewhere. Same with Sam Leavitt on the top there. Now, back to Auburn. There has been a lot of discussion about what's happening at Auburn, right? Alex Galesh comes in, he gets hired. Thought he was inheriting a good roster, but remember, especially with new coaching hires, a lot of these guys are going to leave. Like, there's no doubt, like, they were going to lose players, and that's kind of the norm here. Anytime you have a coaching hire, I mean, you saw this with Kellen DeBoer at Bama, right? Albeit those if Auburn's more extreme, with Bama it was a little bit more tame because it was a very small collection of players, but still very impactful. Even Alabama faced it when DeBoer was hired, so it's not a shocker that certain players are going to leave when a new coach gets hired. But with Auburn, it's not just Cam Coleman. Like, they've lost all their receivers. They've lost, I believe, almost 60 players. So it's like almost 100% of their roster is like gone. There's like maybe a few leftovers. Now, some of the players who are leaving, like, freaking Jackson Arnold, like, who cares? But like Cam Coleman, a lot of those receivers from that freeze recruiting class, Deuce Knight. There's two camps you can look at this. One, the first camp is it really does hurt. And it does. I've seen a lot of folks talk about this, both personally and on the internet. It sucks. It really does suck to lose these guys. I mean, Cam Coleman, wherever he goes, whether it's, in the SEC or, I don't know, for all we know, he goes to Ohio State or elsewhere, he's going to be a very good superstar player. When he's drafted or draft eligible, definitely going to be a top 10 pick. But so that's the one route, right, where it's like, yeah, we're losing a lot of talent. It sucks. And it looks like, unfortunately for Auburn, for the second time this decade, they were going to have to initiate a full-on roster rebuild. As for the other side of things, and look, this is official, but it does seem like some of it is true that, there's a lot of rumors on message boards and whatnot about, where a lot of these Hugh Freeze recruits, especially a lot of the 5-star guys and the higher level, or the higher quality guys, were they necessarily the best quality players? Were they the best, or, well, they were the best quality players, but were they the best character people? Were they, high quality players of character flaws, right? I'm having an example, recent example of, a good stable of talent that was highly flawed characterly, or from a character standpoint, was Jimbo Fisher in Texas A&M, right? A lot of those 5-star guys who Fisher recruited at A&M, a lot of those guys were, getting in trouble legally and whatnot, just very, poor teammates. There's been rumors and things going around about, certain Auburn players who, I think Cam Coleman was in there, Deuce Knight was in there too, where, not the best character guys, but talented guys, but, very much so had character flaws. And, the thinking is, the staff maybe wanted to keep him, and potentially wanted to find ways to bring a lot of these guys back, but because of, several circumstances, whether it's, DJ Durkin, who is still on staff there, who was the interim coach, giving him information about, hey, here's certain players that, were troublemakers on the team. Why not just bring them back? That's all a real possibility. But I can't shake the fact that this will have to be, yet again, for Auburn fans, another roster rebuild. Not a total program rebuild, but another roster rebuild. And much like everyone else, I mean, look, I think the way that Hugh Freeze, and look, the way he did with the other things like the offense and stuff, he needs to be fired for that. His ability, Hugh Freeze's ability to bring this roster back to at least a respectable, quality standpoint, that was great. I mean, based on where they were with Brian Harsin, but now it's almost like he had it, but now we're starting over again. If you're an Auburn fan, and I feel for you guys. I mean, this yet again, you're having to go through another pretty significant rebuild. I would just say this, based on, and again, we don't know what they'll do in the portal. Who knows? They could get a top 5 class and then kind of need you. To be honest with you, if they want to be reasonably competitive, but based on the fact that they've lost so much talent, and again, I am pretty sure none of these guys are coming back. Like Cam Coleman, Deuce Knight, a lot of those other receivers, they're goners. I find it very hard to believe they're coming back. I think it's very clear that they'll not be welcome back, and they are gone forever. You'll be seeing them in different uniforms. But as for Auburn, look, if they want to be respectable next year and be competing for at least somewhat of a decent, what's the word here? I guess at least not going 5-7. They need to knock out of the park. There you go. Yeah, they need to do very well in the portal. Because if they don't, and they are left with a lot of scraps and a lot of average players, next year could, and again, I don't want to be very, very careful. Because again, we don't know what they'll do in the portal. But look, if they're not careful here, and look, I have faith in Alex Galesh. Okay, he's a good coach. Someone that I think is going to do some good things there. But again, unfortunately, just because of the way the sport is right now, and how coaching changes work, he is entering in a very, very poor roster. Like I think at the moment, Auburn's roster is the worst in the SEC, even behind Arkansas. I think it's really that bad. And if they don't replenish this very quickly, if they don't get decent enough talent, they could potentially have one of the worst seasons I can ever remember them having in a long time. Even worse than 5-7. Yes, there is a way they can get worse. How should I say this? I guess I could. The way the roster is currently constructed, like the way this season can go next year and how tough the schedule is, there's a chance they can go like 2-10, 3-9. Like that's how bad this can get. Again, hopefully I won't for Auburn fans. Hopefully that's not the case. But again, based on just so much talent they're losing, so many players are just a total mass exodus. I know they're not the only ones, but if they are believed the only school or the only program that's having to deal with like almost the entire roster gone, like them and Iowa State both are the ones who are really getting hurt here for the portal. I think that's on the table next year. 3 wins, 2 wins. If they don't replenish in the portal, if they do, then that's different. But if they don't, and they fumble the back here, this could be a historically bad season for them. And it's already been a very bad stretch for them. It can get worse. I'll just say that it can get way worse than it was last year. And they were somewhat talented. So look, if this happens, this is going to happen until certain things are put into place, until the calendar changes, until certain regulations are put into NIL. You're going to have guys. You're going to have situations where you're going to have mass exodus of players. And Auburn and Iowa State both, unfortunately, were the examples of this year. Now, I'm not saying Auburn's poor or anything. I'm not saying that. Like they have money, but I just worry that even if they do get talent, which they kind of have to, but even if they get if they get talent, but it's not like nowhere near what they had before, it could be a really bad year. Now, thankfully, the bright side here is with the type of offense that Josh Heupel is running, you do not need to have elite wide receivers, elite quarterback play. Go look at Tennessee. Go look at our Bryles at Baylor. Like none of those guys were stars in the NFL. No, but then again, especially with the Baylor example, that was the old Big 12. This is the SEC, and Auburn's schedule next year is ridiculously tough. One of the tougher ones that I think they've had in a while. So again, like if they don't replenish well in the portal, if they cannot reasonably get talent, which I think they'll get some talent. I think for example, Byron Brown, the quarterback from South Florida, he's in the portal officially. Probably going to go to Auburn because they need a quarterback now because they have no active one on the roster. again, if they can't, if they miss out on him, they miss out on like some receivers and uh, really good depth players and whatnot, and decent enough talent, especially on the lines of scrimmage. Again, next year could be really, really bad for them. I just have a really bad feeling that it can get ugly next year. So hopefully that's not the case, but it's a little not looking too good. And again, man, I just want to emphasize how much talent they've lost up this team. Like, it is incredible how you can go from having one of the best rosters in the SEC to now having frankly the worst one in the SEC. That's not hyperbole. That is probably true. That they have unfortunately been surpassed by Arkansas, or they have surpassed Arkansas as the worst roster in the SEC. Didn't think I would say that 10 years ago, but here we are. And finally, here I guess we'll wrap up with Bucs Panthers. Game 2, a very high stakes game, sort of. Game's on ESPN tomorrow, 4:30. Chris Fowler, Louis Riddick, Darren Lossie calling the game. So not Big Joe Buck and Troy. They're doing the other game. I believe it's 49ers and Seahawks. That's the battle for the NFC West and the number 1 overall seed. For that one, which makes sense. I mean, this game that's happening with the Bucs game is the least appealing one, but just as important. According to FanDuel, not a sponsor of the show, just asset we use. If I can get to the tab, Tampa is a somehow 3-point favorite. Don't know how. Sort of copy and paste what I said a couple weeks ago about this. The game back then, the first game. Both of these teams are mirrors of each other. Both of these teams, Tampa and Carolina, very consistent. Like, you can just look at their records, look at the way they've operated. They are literally mirrors of each other. And Tampa is somehow multiple games worse. Of course, they lost to the Dolphins this past weekend. And look, I'm not going to say it's the worst loss of this decade. That was, I think, to the Saints a couple weeks ago. But this team to me feels lost. And I think I mentioned this on Twitter that it feels like to me, especially on defense, a lot of the defensive guys, it just seems like to me they just want the season to get over with. Like, they just want this done. Like, they just want to move on. They want to just get to the off season and whatnot and go to Cancun and whatnot. They seem like they're done to me. But it's one more game, and unfortunately, though, if Tampa were to win, they still need to or at least be paying attention to the Falcons. Falcons. Who was it? Falcons. Yeah, Falcons Saints. Forgot who they were playing. Yeah, Falcons Saints game, because Tampa went over against the Falcons, and excuse the TV back there. I think there's a bowl game on. Because you lost to the Falcons twice, if you lose and the Falcons were to somehow win, Carolina then gets the nod because they have the better divisional. It's really weird if Tampa wins. Now, if Carolina wins, puts Tampa fans out of their misery. They know what their status is for the postseason. They're done, and that's kind of it. For Tampa to win this game here, they just need to. I don't know what to say. They just need to play hard and need to be serious on defense, not let mistakes happen. Happened the first time they played the Panthers, right? Defense kind of was doing fairly well for the first half, but that second half, man, they give a big play after big play. The Panthers offense with Canales, they went from looking like total crap in the first half to really, I think, doubling Tampa in yards. So they cannot let that happen. Like, they cannot, screw around on defense. I know there's a lot of players out, like Jamil Dean's not going to play, so there's already, players out with a already crappy secondary. Obviously Baker, the turnover has been a problem for him lately, game-stealing interceptions. And what's really weird, too, is that the offense, again, has not been the problem for Tampa. The offense has been fine under Gazar. Now, Grange isn't where it was with, like, Liam Cohen and, speaking of Carolina, with Dave Canales. No, it's not the same level, but it's not, like, that far off. It's not, like, bad, but it's, like, kind of, like, in between. Like, it's not, like, where it was under Brian Leftwich. So it's, like, in between Leftwich and what you got under Canales and especially under Liam Cohen. But, the offense I'm not worried about, though the turnovers are becoming an issue. Also, Tampa being less aggressive at times, too. I feel like they were not very aggressive in both the Panthers game and against Dolphins last week, this past Sunday. So hopefully they open up a little bit more in the playbook. It's at home, which helps Tampa. I believe that's why they're favored. I don't know what to say here. I mean, I think a lot of folks know who these teams are. Tampa bad on defense. Carolina sort of the same, but I think with Carolina, their problem is their offense is so consistent. But again, when they faced Tampa a couple weeks ago, the second half they looked pretty good. So yeah, if you can tell here, I'm not really very motivated here to really do this preview. I have no interest, and I think a lot of Tampa folks feel this way. I think they just, much like the players, they just want to get this done with. And this has not been a good year. It's been a very, very tough year to watch this team, especially ever since like the first after Halloween. Ugh. But yeah, Tampa somehow a 3-point favorite. My gut wants me to choose Tampa here, just because how inconsistent Carolina is. Week to week, it's very. I mean, look, they just got blown out by Seattle, whereas Tampa was able to beat them back earlier. But I cannot get out of my head the fact that Tampa, both as a fan base collectively and as we'll accept from the team, they just want this shit done with. And I think they lose Saturday, and I think it could get ugly. So I'm going to take the Carolina Panthers to win the game outright. I have no real feel in the money line if I were to take it. I mean, I guess I'll say the Panthers probably cover whatever the spread was, 3.5 or a 3. Yeah, I just feel like this team's dead to me. I don't know. Just something just feels off. And even if Tampa wins, I mean, I have to hope that the Saints somehow win, and that's not a guarantee. But I don't know. I think much like everyone else, I want the season done with. I want massive changes to be made. And we can talk about that in the weeks to come during the offseason and then go into the draft, I guess, for agency. But yeah, it's been difficult to really get excited for this game. I just can't go with Tampa right now. So yeah, picking the Panthers to win. I think this team just once it's done and once it's over with, and yeah, I've seen reports going around about hey, Todd Bowles is probably going to be back next year. Probably true, but much like a lot of folks, I think we're up to the point where I think all of us would be much more excited with a new regime than what we have currently. But I'm not the ones making the decisions. That's the Glazer family making that decision. Apparently, there are no plans to make regime change happen, which, unfortunately, kind of feel like Florida State fans right now. It just kind of feels like we have a lame duck head coach going to next year, but what are you going to do? But that's the show. How about that? Under an hour. I know there's a lot of things you did not get to, like, for example, a lot of Avengers Doomsday stuff, a lot of things coming out. We'll discuss that next. We'll talk about that on the Tuesday show. More likely, when we discuss that. Waiting for some stuff to drop. Of course, you got the Thor teaser publicly released. The X-Men trailer, yes, I've seen it, and boy, does it look good. That should be publicly released on Tuesday if the schedule is consistent. So, yeah, we'll talk more about the Marvel stuff on the Tuesday show. We're back to the usual schedule. But, yeah, of course, there's other things you missed out on, other things I want to talk about. But we'll talk more about that once we get back to the regular schedule. Again, this is a Friday special, and I usually do these, let alone this late here, about to be 10:30 here on the East Coast as I'm live. But of course, you on Spotify. It doesn't matter. But real quick, let me make sure. I know my microphone was not. Hopefully, it's not dead. I don't think it is, but make sure you guys can hear me. Hopefully, you can. Okay, it is still working. So that's good. So yeah, that's it for the show. Again, we'll be back on Tuesday, same usual time as I would imagine. So until then, I guess enjoy the NFL games. Again, there's games tomorrow. There's obviously the rest of the games on Saturday or Sunday. So until then, enjoy the rest of your end of the week. Again, hopefully you guys had a great holidays, Christmas, whatever you celebrate. Mine was great. Great time with friends and family. But yeah, we're back now, and we're hopefully, if we're never seeing for the foreseeable future, we'll be back to the normal, barring any like for example, any like surgery or whatever where I can't talk or whatever, which may or may not happen. You never know. But like barring that, like the show's still going ahead, so we're not going anywhere. A lot of things to discuss and to go over. But yeah, so until Tuesday, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the NFL games this week, enjoy, I guess, on rewinding, if you will, from the holidays and just back to normalcy. So until Tuesday, again, enjoy the weekend, take care, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.